Hi, I'm John Abood, a penetration tester at CyberCX, and I hate SMS-based MFA. I'm here to explain why I've been screaming at friends, family, and colleagues to change their login methods ever since doing this research. Now, I'm not here to talk about MFA bypasses, which is common enough as an attack path that there are now labs teaching you how to do it. This is about SIM swapping. And for anyone that might not know, SIM swapping, otherwise traditionally known as the port out scam, is the act of taking control of a victim SIM card by convincing a telco to switch the service for you. Now, why? Well, because for just about every account that most of us own, especially important ones like email, there's always a way to recover the account in the event that you've lost the password. Often via verification text or call, which means that as a hacker, all I need is access to your mobile number, and I can comfortably reset your password and let myself into your online life. An adversary can also happen to know your password and just need your SIM card to complete the sign-in process. Now, this SMS verification is only as secure as the phone, or for our purposes, the SIM card that receives it. Now, you may have seen SIM swapping in the news recently, primarily in the United States, as it's still running rampant as an attack vector. This is solely because it has, over time, proven to be one of the most effective and easily performable attacks. My introduction to SIM swapping was many years ago in Minecraft, of all places. I was the variety of nerd thought it'd be really fun to make my own server and build a community. And I quickly learned, however, that these servers can actually be really profitable, as players would pay for in-game perks and role assignments. Because which 12-year-old doesn't want to pay 10 bucks and be an administrator and get their first grip on power? But what I didn't account for at the time was just how profitable these servers are. So much so that it was worth taking out the competition. My server was quickly met with DDoSes left, right, and center. Some of the sharper kids in the community would deface websites of other servers. And now keep in mind, we're talking about a player base that was anywhere from 12 to 16 years old. But the best of them, they would SIM swap the owner's phone, reset the password on the server host, and then delete all of their files. Brilliant. And that was then. At the age of 14, I moved on to much more important things, like discovering girls exist and that the graphics are much better outside. My reintroduction, however, to SIM swapping was through the Darknet Diaries podcast. Any fans of the Darknet Diaries podcast would have loved, there we go, episode 112, where we heard stories from the younger hacking community and their exploits with SIM swapping. This was nothing like it was when I was doing it. I mean, when other people were doing it to me. But the next generation were going so much further. They were kidnapping and committing arson as if life was just some sort of off-brand gangster movie. And they were doing this in the name of getting your SMS-based multi-factor authentication code. Okay, like why? For the average person, you'd argue that taking over our online profile is a great hack, but it's certainly not worth assaulting over. Cryptocurrency. Sweet, sweet, juicy cryptocurrency. While hacking someone's email and then using that to drain their bank account and laundering the money before being caught is possible, it is so much easier to find a frat bro talking about crypto on Twitter, hunting down their phone number and SIM swapping them in order to steal it. Now, when this started ramping up, it became a bigger problem quicker than when my first hand of blackjack turned into all-nighters on Sportsbet, betting on Russian ping pong, and someone had to stop it. Enter the ACMA. Otherwise known as ACMA, which is short for the Australian Media and Communications Authority. That took a really long time to animate. ACMA released a determination in April of this year that would guide telcos and how they validate customer identities. Now, I could sit here and show you a pile of boring text and make you read subsections and notes and cross-references, but I already did that, and I'll save you the trouble. The key phrase and point of this determination is high-risk customer interactions. Now, high risk does not mean high risk in the traditional sense, like taking out billions of dollars in loans to buy your favorite social media platform and then running it into the ground, or high risk like locking out all your clients' domain admins because you accidentally sprayed 33 passwords instead of 3. No, this reference to high risk is anything that could result in loss of service or data confidentiality for telco users. And knowing how easy SIM swapping has been traditionally, I figured I had to find out how effective the determination was. My approach to this research was very similar to the way I handled school tests and pickup lines. If I eventually tried enough methods, I'll get one right. And given the increased difficulty of SIM swapping, I decided I'm not talking about effective methods for compromising you and I. My approach to this research was, but the extent that someone might go to compromise a high value target, such as rich people and politicians and celebrities. If you really wanted to, what could you do? And I wanted to consider everything from shoulder surfing MFA codes in the streets to plainly stealing mobile phones. But I had to make sure that all the hacks I pulled off were repeatable and didn't require direct access to the victim. So I settled on the following options. Promise there's 5, even though it looks like 10. Behind door number 1 was the traditional method of SIM swapping, otherwise known as the port out scam. Now, the original method of SIM swapping was as easy as giving your victim's name, number, and date of birth to the company you wanted to switch their service to, and they would handle the rest. Sometimes that also involved an address, and in very rare cases, an account number. But for the most part, it was very straightforward. So to align with the new ACMA determination, all major telcos have now implemented significantly stricter processes for porting numbers. As a legitimate customer, there are 2 paths we can take, with access to the phone and without. Now, if you do have access to the phone, your road to porting your number is beautiful and lovely and quick. Your new telco will send you a code. They enter this into their own system, which unlocks the option for staff to perform the port out. And you'll leave a very happy camper. However, if you don't have access to the phone because you either broke it and the SIM card beyond repair, or because you've lost it entirely, the road to porting a number is terrifying. It involves sending your telco 100 points of identification or more, which is entered into a system for DVS verification. It can take up to 2 or 3 days. Given that this could generate unwanted communication of the victim, as well as taking far too long, I decided to reject traditional SIM swapping as a valid method of attack in 2022. Moving on, I pivoted to door number 2, which animated a lot like door number 1, but canceling the victim's service and quickly buying the service out from underneath them. This idea only has merit, as a number of telcos will allow you to cancel your service, having only verified your name, date of birth, and phone number. This process can also be completed very, very quickly online using their support teams. However, the idea was shut down quicker than Liz Truss's career when I discovered that canceled numbers at all major telcos enter a 6-month quarantine process. This is to prevent new number holders having to deal with nonsense from previous number holders. Admittedly, the idea was a bit silly, but I had to try. And behind door number 3, however, was my best idea to date. This was to request a replacement SIM. Now, if I can't port the number out of the telco, why not just rip it out from underneath them? In theory, this is very simple. And the test went as follows. Walk into my friendly local telco, put on a big smile, and ask nicely if they'll hand me an activated SIM card over the counter, which actually worked. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, that's fine. What sort of verification did they ask for before you did this? On a few too many occasions at some unnamed telcos, none. They asked for my name, my number, and then just handed me an activated SIM card. On one occasion at a different unnamed telco, they visually cited my ID faster than you could say ka-chow, which led me to believe they weren't actually checking anything at all. Well, I don't know about all of you, but contrary to what my ex-girlfriend might think, replacements should not be that easy. So what should staff be checking? I won't pretend that it's the best security measure, but I would love if before handing out a replacement SIM, they would at least check specific details like the license number and the license card number. These are fields that an adversary might have a little bit more trouble finding. But when I asked at all major telcos to see my file, they never even stored that license information, only ever keeping my name, date of birth, and address. Now, in about 2 hours, you'll hear from one of my colleagues, Harrison Mitchell, about the, about the pitfalls of DNS. Alongside some of our peers in security research, Harrison demonstrated that it's far too easy to forge Service New South Wales licenses, despite attempts to obfuscate the code base and protect the application. And if you only ever need to know your victim's name, date of birth, and occasionally their address, ordering a replacement SIM card over the counter is a very strong and repeatable attack path. Now, of course, you then have the problem of in-store cameras, but humor me for the moment that the attack path itself is functional. It's also very important to note here that this exclusively works on telcos with a storefront, as the excuse "I lost my SIM" is met by smaller telcos with "send us every identity document you've ever had." But behind door number 4, I wanted to try something a little bit ridiculous. Forging a power of attorney. Alongside a sob story, you know, that the account holder could not get their phone, or they were incapacitated or something along those lines, and seeing whether a telco would accept that. In case anyone doesn't know, power of attorney is a document that gives another person or a collection of people the ability to act on your behalf in all matters financial, legal, and sometimes health, in the event that you can no longer make those decisions for yourself. Now, prior to the Optus hack, this attack had some serious merit, because after all, it is very easy to create a power of attorney document that is legally binding. There are two types of these documents. There's the registered and the unregistered. Both of them are legally binding power of attorney documents. But in order to interact with some government bodies like the Land Registry Services, the document has to be registered before you can do anything. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to actually forge a legal document in the name of research because I really like my job and I really don't like jail. So I actually went and made one, a real power of attorney letter that someone could use in order to either port my phone number or get a replacement SIM card. But these documents require a recipient, and I needed someone I could trust to legally have control over my entire life. Please allow me to introduce you to my team leader, Abood Mehdi. If there was anyone I could trust with the ability to take all $8 out of my bank account and send me spiraling into debt, it was Abood. As an aside, I thought it would be quite funny to give Abood the power to hand out gifts on my behalf, as well as cover his own living expenses, which is a joke the CyberCX legal counsel did not enjoy. But throughout the research, I spoke to a lot of employees from a variety of telcos and was informed very plainly that these documents are taken seriously because they're only ever used in times of grieving families or people who are really struggling and need to use a power of attorney. However, this was in the weeks leading up to the Optus hack, because when we went to test this after the hack, Abood was ushered out of the store the moment he walked in and told to deal with the advanced support teams. How much impact the Optus hack had on that attack path, I couldn't tell you. There is still significant merit in considering how incredibly easy these documents are to create and the implications that can have on other attacks further down the line. But that's for the next time CyberCX mistakenly gives me a budget for R&D. Before we move on to the last serious option, I want to give some honorable mentions to the ideas that never made the cut, namely faking my own death. And using the death certificate to transfer the account. Now, this doesn't work as bereavement processes at telcos require a full transfer to another person, which means you would have had to compromise someone's identity to do it. It's doable, but it's very difficult. Intercepting a port out SMS message to validate on the spot. Now, this wasn't considered as I have no idea how to do it. If you do, please come and find me after the presentation. And the third one is robbing the telcos of their iPads that actually do the software, that actually do the transfer. Now, we know it doesn't work to transfer because the process isn't unlocked until after you have your verification code, but you could use it to activate a new replacement SIM card. This was the method used in the Darknet Diaries podcast for anyone that did listen to it. I ruled this out for my research as I had no intention of robbing a telco. And I figured if you're willing to rob one, then you're probably willing to rob other places and make a lot more money. But that's it for the honorable mentions. On to my final method here. Without further ado, my fifth seemingly valid idea is bribery. While I did rule out the ability for everyday staff to override the porting out process, there's absolutely nothing to stop them handing over replacement SIM cards or transferring whole accounts. This method has been documented extensively here, just as it has for all industries, and it's terribly understandable for an employer making approximately minimum wage to accept a lump sum of money for a momentary lapse of judgment or to suggest they did check the ID documents. And when paydays for pulling off successful SIM swaps are in the millions of dollars, giving a 16-year-old telco employee $20,000 isn't even close to out of the question. So this is all good and well to suggest, but forgery and bribery is the best you can do? Well, yeah, it kind of is. But it's important to note two factors here. Firstly, ACMA's determination and definition of high-risk customer interactions is being ignored by all major telcos outside of porting numbers. Secondly, as all security consultants can attest, SMS-based MFA is frustratingly used to protect some seriously sensitive accounts and material. The right SIM swap on the right target in 2022 could be all that's required for state-sponsored hacks and corporate espionage. And given that this only requires a little bit of forgery, it's not out of the question. So what do you do? Well, begin by changing all SMS-based MFA protections you have to application or device-based. While you might not be a target for bragging about all your sweet Dogecoin, most of you here today are in industry and have access to sensitive customer or government details. Now, even though as an example, CyberCX has application-based MFA, adversaries aren't just targeting your corporate accounts. No one's afraid to go after you personally. And I seem to be missing some notes. But I didn't just come here to complain about this problem and not offer a solution. I do enough of that every time my mom registers a new account with the password summer 2022. Please don't hack my mom. But the idea comes to me courtesy of a friend, Trevor Long, who suggested centralized cryptographic identity verification. And this concept is in no way new, but it hasn't been deployed widely enough in Australia across either government or consumer. And it works very similarly to the way that you can scan a license using the QR code in the Service New South Wales app. This process needs to be extended out to passports, to Medicaid cards. Any form of identification should require a cryptographic response. There's no reason that in 2022, your companies need to store this identity document. On a small scale and much more practically, all we can do is report the issue to the major telcos and wait patiently for either them to align with the legislation or for someone important enough to get hacked. And I can stop desperately trying to convince my colleagues to let me raise SMS-based MFA as a critical issue in every pen test that I do. Thank you very much.